Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Today is Thursday, June 3rd, 2021. It is the 23rd day of the month of Sivan. It is, as we come closer to this week's Torah reading, the Torah reading of Shalach. So today we will have a little overview of today's Torah reading and its contemporary application. In today's Torah reading, we read about, as we mentioned for the past few days, the story about the scouts that Moses sends to the land of Israel. And when they come back with their terrible news and saying that they will not be able to conquer the land of Israel, and because of that, God gets upset at the Jewish people, telling them that they will have to wander in the desert for 40 years. The Torah then continues to tell us about the episodes and the stories that followed. And the Torah tells us concerning the laws pertaining separating challah and the laws pertaining tzitzis and some other laws that are mentioned in this week's Torah reading as well. But if we move to the Haftorah of this week, we read in the prophets of a story where Joshua as well, when he moves into the land of Israel, and the Jewish people are set to conquer the land of Israel, and the stronghold, what they call the lock of the land of Israel at the time, was the city of Jericho. And he then sends two spies to spy out the land of Jericho as well. The two spies at the time were Caleb and Pinchas, who later on becomes Elijah the prophet. And the obvious question that many ask is, didn't Moses see what was wrong? Didn't Joshua see what went wrong by Moses when he was part of the 12 spies? 10 of them were corrupt and came back saying bad things about the land of Israel. He was the only two that came back saying the righteous things and merited to go into the land of Israel. Why didn't Joshua learn from his predecessor's mistake and say, if Moses made a mistake by sending the spies because he ended up landing and touring the land of Israel, the desert, for 40 years, then he should have been weary of the fact that sending spies to the land of Israel, to Jericho, would have caused that mistake as well. So what was it that within Joshua did not realize the mistake that his predecessor made? And the same mistake that we may ask on Moses himself. Moses should have seen all these red flags. When God comes along and tells you, if you want to do it, that's your business, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. Shouldn't that tell you a red flag of saying, I maybe shouldn't be doing it? Why did Moses go ahead with the plan? And to the extent he went ahead with the plan, that Joshua, his successor, did the same thing again. The Talmud tells us a very unique story. And there's an interesting debate about the story. The Talmud tells us about an individual whose wife passed away at a very young age and left an orphan child. And this fellow did not know what to do. How was he going to feed his child? And he had no money. He was a poor man. He couldn't hire a wet nurse. So he asked God. He says, God, listen here. There's three partners in a person. The father, the mother, and God. You are the third partner. You have an obligation to take care of this child, as do I. Do your part. And the Talmud tells us that miraculously, this individual got breasts and he was able to feed his child. And the question is, that was the debate amongst the Talmudic scholars. One Talmudic scholar said, wow, look at this person. How God did this miraculous event for him. While another rabbi in the Talmud says, how terrible that this individual demands of God to change nature the way humans were created just for his own benefit. So what's the problem with it? Isn't it a miraculous event, regardless of what it is? What's wrong with it? And the answer is because God gives us tools within nature that we should be able to do our task and accomplish our goals and fulfill our mission. And without looking for adventurous or beyond supernatural ways, we should be able to look within the means and within the tools that God has given us to utilize it and to make it work, that we should be able to accomplish our mission. There's a very interesting story told by a fellow by the name of Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinberg. He was the executive vice president of the Orthodox Union for many years. He today lives in the land of Israel. And he says a story that many years ago, that while he was in Maryland, and he was going through a midlife crisis. He felt a little depressed of what he should do and how he should go about it, had his questions and his faith in God. And he decided he's going to call anonymously to the Rebbe's office to find out some advice or some solace of what he can do. And when he called the Rebbe's office, he spoke to the Rebbe's secretary. This is going back in the early 1950s, 1960. And the secretary says, just one moment. And on the phone, he asks the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, tell this person that there's a fellow by the name Weinreb in Maryland, and he should ask him what to do. He looks in shock. He says, I didn't say my name. Who is he going and referring to? And only after a little bit of contemplation, after the secretary a little bit prodding him a little bit, he really understood what the Rebbe was telling him is that if God gives you a dilemma, it's a question of looking deeper within yourself to be able to find the resolution to be able to fix it. What Moses understood when God was telling him, Shlach lecha l'daitecha, send spies, send scouts on your own intuition, was that God was telling him that I don't want to make this a miraculous event like when I took you out of Egypt, I just placed you and I did everything for you. I crossed the sea, gave you the Torah. It's time that you begin to work on your own. It's time that you begin to make decisions on your own, that you decide and use your own creativity with the tools that I've given you to be able to conquer the land of Israel. And therefore Moshe found it necessary to send scouts, because he understood that going into the land of Israel, we were now shifting from the coddling that God was giving us to becoming individual people, to become personalities on our own, recognizing, taking the gifts that God has given us and utilizing it and making something out of it. So he sent scouts to make it in the vessel of nature. He decided that l'daitecha, when God says according to your wisdom, according to your knowledge, meaning God is empowering him, saying you now have the power to bring about and conquer the land of Israel within your own tools, within your own abilities. Joshua believed the same, that when they came into the land of Israel, they had the power and the impetus and the ability to overcome those challenges and to conquer Jericho within a natural way, of course, with God's blessings and God's miraculous events, but they need to make the tools, they need to make the vessels for it. And the same idea was with the scholar in the Talmud who said, it's no point to be able to pray to God and just throw all your dependency for miraculous events to happen. God wants you to use the tools of nature, not distort it, to be able to bring about what you need to do and accomplish your goal and task. The same is true with every single one of us. God is sending us on a mission, sends us on a mission in this world. And he tells us, l'daitecha, I don't want to coddle you along the way. I don't want to have to guard you or change nature. I want you to work within the talents, qualities, and nature that I've given you in making this world an abode, a beautiful place for God, in accomplishing your mission. Every single one of us, God gave us the tools to do it. He is now telling us, l'daitecha, utilize those tools, make use of it. Make sure that you dig deep within yourself. Find within yourself the consciousness, the awareness, the soul, and the tools and the gifts that God has given you so you can really live up to who you truly meant to be. God bless you. Have a good Shabbos. And let us all dig a little deeper into ourselves. Recognize the empowerment that God has given every single one of us, that we can and we will fulfill our mission. God bless you and have a great day. Good Shabbos.